Mason had been riding along the quiet countryside road for hours, moving at the slow pace of someone who had nowhere urgent to be. The afternoon sun was soft now, lowering behind distant hills and painting the sky with warm shades of orange and peach. His horse's steady footsteps were the only sound in the wide open space. He enjoyed this kind of silence. After many days of work on the ranch, these peaceful rides helped him clear his mind. He liked watching the wind brush through the tall grass and the gentle movement of leaves on the trees along the road. Everything felt calm, almost too calm. As he reached a bend in the road, something unusual caught his eye. At first, he thought it might be just another shadow or a lonely tree trunk, but as he moved closer, he realized it was a young girl standing near the edge of the trees, half hidden behind a large stone. Her long dark hair flowed gently with the breeze. Her clothes were simple but clean, and something about her posture suggested that she was trying not to be seen. She looked like she belonged to the land in a way he did not connected to it, shaped by it. Mason slowed his horse, unsure if he should stop or keep going. But something about the way she stood there made him pause. The girl had her head slightly bowed, her shoulders a little tense, as if she were holding back emotions that wanted to escape. She wiped her cheek quickly, trying to make the movement look casual, but he noticed it anyway. It wasn't the kind of wipe someone gives when dust gets in their eye. It was the kind someone uses when trying to hide tears. He didn't want to scare her, so he gently pulled the reins and let his horse stop a short distance away. He kept his voice soft. "Afternoon," he said kindly. The girl didn't answer. She simply turned her face slightly away, pretending she hadn't heard him. But Mason could see her shoulders rise and fall with an unsteady breath. He waited a moment, giving her time, not wanting to push too quickly. He knew from experience that people who were hurting didn't always want to talk right away. After a slow pause, he tried again. "You all right?" he asked, still careful with his tone. This time, she glanced at him for a second. Her eyes were dark, gentle, but full of something heavy. She quickly looked away again. "I'm fine," she mumbled, barely above a whisper. The words sounded more like a practiced response than the truth. Mason knew that answer well. It was the same answer he himself had used many times while growing up when someone asked him how he was doing after a hard day. Mason could see she wanted to be strong, or at least appear strong. She stood still, hands clasped together. He could sense she was trying her best to hold herself together. She didn't want a stranger to see her in a moment of weakness. He looked around. The road was empty. The countryside was quiet. There was nothing here except the two of them, a few trees, and the soft sound of wind brushing across the land. It wasn't a place someone stood, unless they had a reason. She wasn't waiting for anyone. She didn't look expectant. She looked lost, not in direction but in her heart. Mason dismounted slowly so she wouldn't feel alarmed. His boots touched the ground with a quiet thud. He held the reins loosely in his hand and walked a few steps closer, leaving enough distance so she wouldn't feel trapped. "If you're fine, that's good," he said gently. "Just wanted to make sure. This road gets a bit lonely." The girl swallowed lightly, still not meeting his eyes. Her voice was barely steady when she answered, "I'm just thinking." He nodded, understanding more than his expression showed. "Nothing wrong with thinking," he said softly. "But sometimes thinking makes people sad." Her fingers tightened slightly around each other. She tried to hide the movement, but Mason didn't miss it. An uneasy silence filled the air, stretching longer with each passing second. Mason didn't want to interrupt her thoughts, but he also didn't want to ride away knowing he had left someone in distress. He took a gentle breath. "My name's Mason," he said quietly, hoping it would make things less uncomfortable. "Didn't mean to bother you. Just thought you might need some company." Even for a moment, the girl hesitated, as though deciding whether to speak at all. Finally, she whispered, "Ayanna." Mason smiled softly. "That's a pretty name." She didn't respond to the compliment, but she didn't hide her face as much anymore. Her eyes lifted slightly, though still avoiding meeting his directly. The breeze brushed her hair across her cheek, and she pushed it back with a shaky hand. "You look like you've been walking for a while," Mason said gently. "Are you headed somewhere?" Ayana shook her head faintly. "No. Just needed air," he nodded. He understood that feeling deeply. Sometimes he also left the ranch after a long day, riding out to breathe, to think, or simply to be alone with the sky. But the difference was that Mason always had a place to return to at the end of the day. The girl in front of him looked like she was carrying more weight than someone her age should. He noticed that her eyes were slightly red, though she had tried hard to hide it. She kept turning her face away, as if ashamed of her tears. Mason felt a soft ache in his chest. He didn't like to see anyone struggle to hide such simple, human feelings. "You don't have to explain anything," Mason said softly. "I just want you to know. You don't have to pretend with me." The words came out naturally. He wasn't trying to sound wise or comforting. He simply spoke what he felt. Ayana froze for a moment, her breath catching slightly. She looked up at him with surprise, as if no one had ever said that to her before. Her expression softened, and for the first time since he saw her, she didn't try to hide her face. There was something incredibly fragile in that moment, something quiet, honest, and real. Her eyes glistened with unspoken feelings, not loud or dramatic, just quietly overwhelming. Ayana looked down again, but her voice wasn't as guarded now. "I'm just tired," she admitted. The simple truth carried a weight far bigger than the word itself. It wasn't the tiredness that sleep could fix. It was the kind that came from carrying too many worries for too long. Mason took another small step closer, careful, respectful. "I understand," he said gently. "Life can be heavy sometimes." She nodded slowly, tears pooling again but not falling. She refused to let them drop. "I don't want anyone to see me like this," she whispered. "Everyone needs a moment," Mason said. "Nothing wrong with that." For a few seconds, she stayed perfectly still. Then she let out a soft breath she had been holding in, almost like a quiet release. She didn't break down or start crying openly, but she allowed herself to stop pretending, even if just for a moment. Mason didn't rush her. He didn't ask for explanations. He simply stood there, offering quiet company. The sky continued to change colors behind them, slowly shifting into the soft shades of early evening. Birds flew overhead, heading home for the night. Even the wind felt gentle, as if nature itself wanted to give her a moment of peace. Ayana finally looked at him, really looked. Her eyes were deep, full of stories she hadn't told yet. He could see the strength inside her, mixed with exhaustion and worry. She wasn't weak. She was simply human, struggling under the weight of something she couldn't yet share. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice calm now, though faint. "You're welcome," Mason said with a warm smile. They stood there in the soft golden light, two strangers who suddenly felt less like strangers. Nothing dramatic happened. No sudden confessions or emotional speeches, but something important began quietly. Trust. Ayana didn't say more, but she didn't hide anymore either. Mason didn't push her, but he stayed by her side, offering the steady presence she needed. In that moment, Ayana realized she didn't have to face everything by herself, and Mason felt something shift in his heart too. He had stopped because he sensed something, and now he knew his instinct had been right. This small, silent meeting on a lonely road was the beginning of a connection. Neither of them expected a moment that would soon grow into a story much bigger than either of them could imagine. Ayana sat quietly under the shade of the old tree, the one standing a little off the road with branches shaped like open arms. Mason guided his horse closer and tied the reins loosely to a low branch before sitting down a respectful distance from her. He didn't want her to feel surrounded or pressured. The earth beneath them was cool, and the soft evening breeze carried the faint smell of the nearby river. The sky had slowly shifted into a deeper shade of orange, mixing with pale pink and purple, giving the whole place a peaceful glow. Ayana kept her gaze on the ground, drawing small circles in the dirt with the tip of her shoe. She wasn't crying anymore, but her breathing still had a soft unsteadiness to it. Mason noticed, but he didn't say anything just yet. He had learned long ago that sometimes silence was the most comforting thing you could offer someone. After a few quiet minutes, he gently placed a small water flask on the ground between them. "In case you're thirsty," he said softly. He didn't push it toward her. He just set it down where she could take it if she wanted. She glanced at it for a moment, then nodded and picked it up, taking a small sip. It wasn't much, but it was enough to show she was slowly letting her guard down. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You're welcome," Mason answered, leaning back against the tree trunk. Another moment passed, calm and slow. Ayanna looked at the sunset as if searching for strength in the colors of the sky. Mason watched her from the corner of his eye, careful not to stare or make her uncomfortable. "I didn't mean to worry you," she finally said, her voice steady but soft. "You didn't worry me," Mason replied. "You just looked like someone who needed a little space. And maybe a little company." She gave a small, almost invisible smile. "Maybe." Her fingers brushed a leaf on the ground. Mason waited for her to continue. Something in her eyes told him she had been carrying her thoughts alone for too long, and now that she had someone willing to listen, the words were trying to find their way out. Ayanna took a deep breath. "I wasn't planning to tell anyone. I don't usually share things." "That's all right," Mason said gently. "You don't owe me anything." She nodded but didn't stop. "It's just been hard lately. My family, we're trying to keep the place where we live. It's small, but it means everything to us." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "My father passed away a few years ago, and since then I've tried to help my mother with everything. She works so hard, but there are things happening now that she can't fix alone." Mason listened without interrupting. His eyes softened. Losing a father was not something anyone healed from easily, and carrying responsibilities after such loss was even harder. Ayanna continued, her voice trembling slightly. "There are people who want to take our land. They say they have papers and rights. But we've lived there for generations. My father took care of that land. And my grandparents too. It's not just a place to us. It's our home, and it holds our memories." She swallowed lightly. "But they keep coming back, telling us to leave, telling us that nothing belongs to us." She wasn't angry, just tired, deeply tired. There was no loud bitterness in her tone, only a quiet sadness that came from fighting the same battle again and again. Mason shifted closer, but only by an inch or two. "I'm sorry you're going through that," he said gently. "It sounds heavy, too heavy for one person." Ayanna lowered her eyes. "I don't want my mother or my younger siblings to worry. They already have enough to handle. So I talk to the people who come to our land. I try to be polite. I try to ask for time. But every time, they get more confident, like they know they're going to win." The wind blew gently through her hair, and she tucked a strand behind her ear. "I came out here today because I didn't want my mother to see me upset," she said quietly. "She's been trying to stay strong, and I don't want her to feel like everything is falling apart." Mason felt a tug inside him, admiration mixed with concern. Ayanna wasn't much more than a girl, yet she was carrying responsibilities far bigger than she should. He could see the weight pressing on her, not in a dramatic way, but in the small details. The way she avoided eye contact, the way her hands fidgeted, the tiredness hidden beneath her calm voice. "Have you asked for help from anyone?" Mason asked softly. "Anyone in your community? Elders? Friends?" Ayanna shook her head. "Most people are dealing with their own problems, and some don't believe we can do anything about it. They say those people have power and influence, and that we just have to accept it." Her voice grew quieter. "But I can't accept it. That's my family's land. If we lose it, we lose everything." Her words hung in the air, delicate and heartbreaking. Mason leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. "You don't have to fight alone. We know." Ayanna let out a soft, weak laugh, not mocking, just tired. "And who would help me? A stranger?" she asked, though not unkindly. "Maybe," Mason said simply. "Strangers can surprise you." She looked at him then, really looked. Her eyes searched his face as if trying to understand why he cared. "You don't even know me," she whispered. "You're right," Mason said with a small smile. "But I know how it feels to carry too much by yourself. And I know when someone is pretending they're okay when they're not." Her eyes shifted away again, but there was less distance in them now. She wasn't trying to hide anymore. She was thinking, considering whether she could trust him. "I didn't want anyone to see me cry," she said quietly. "It's all right to cry," Mason replied gently. "Doesn't make you weak, makes you human." Her throat tightened slightly, and she blinked several times to keep the tears from falling. "I try to stay strong for my siblings. They're young. They shouldn't see me upset. That doesn't mean you have to be strong every minute," Mason said, his voice steady and warm. "Even the strongest people need someone to lean on sometimes." Ayanna looked down at her hands. "I just don't want to fail them," she whispered. "You haven't failed anyone," Mason said. "You're doing everything you can, but you're doing it alone. And that makes it harder." Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she inhaled slowly. The weight she had been carrying seemed to sit between them like a heavy stone. But now, it didn't feel invisible anymore. Mason could see it clearly, and she knew he could. "You're very kind," she said softly. "I didn't expect to meet someone out here who would listen." Mason shrugged lightly. "Sometimes, life puts the right people in your path when you need them most." Ayanna gave a small, quiet smile. "Maybe." The sky grew dimmer as the sun slowly slipped behind the hills. Fireflies began to appear, glowing softly around them. Ayanna watched them for a moment, letting the peaceful scene calm her heart. "When I was little," she said suddenly, "my father used to bring me out here. He said this was the best place to think. He said the land speaks softly when you listen." Mason smiled gently. "He sounds like a good man." "He was," she replied with warmth in her voice. "He always told me to stand strong, but also to trust the earth beneath my feet. He said it remembers everything. Stand self." Mason nodded. "Sounds like something worth holding on to." She looked up at the sky, as though searching for her father in the fading light. "Sometimes I wish he was still here. He'd know what to do." "I think he'd be proud of you," Mason said quietly. "For fighting for your home, for your family, for everything he cared about." Her eyes softened, and for a moment, she looked peaceful. "You really think so?" she asked. "I do," Mason said. "And I also think you shouldn't face this alone." Ayanna didn't respond right away. She seemed to be thinking deeply, weighing his words. Finally, she whispered, "Maybe I do need help." Mason felt a gentle relief wash over him, not because she depended on him now, but because she had allowed herself to admit it. "We'll figure it out," he said warmly. "One step at a time." "We?" she repeated, looking at him with gentle surprise. "If you'll let me," Mason said. For the first time since he'd seen her, Ayanna smiled fully soft, grateful, still fragile, but real. "All right," she said quietly. "I'll trust you." The stars began to appear above them, and the countryside night grew calm around them. Two people from different worlds sat under the same tree, sharing a moment neither of them expected. It wasn't dramatic or loud. It was simple, warm, and honest. And it was the beginning of something that would soon change both of their lives in ways neither could imagine. The next morning arrived with a gentle golden light spreading across the fields. Mason woke early, just as he always did, but today, he felt different. There was a sense of purpose inside him, something warm and steady. He kept thinking about Ayanna, about the weight she carried, about the quiet strength in her voice, and the trust she finally placed in him. It wasn't something he took lightly. He knew trust like hers wasn't given easily. After feeding his horse and grabbing a few things from the ranch, he set out toward her village. It was farther than he expected, tucked behind hills and surrounded by tall trees that seemed to protect it. The place felt peaceful, almost sacred. Small houses made of wood and clay stood in neat clusters, and smoke gently curled from their chimneys. Children played in the open space near the river, their laughter soft in the morning air. A few villagers watched Mason from a distance, curious but not unfriendly. A cowboy passing through wasn't something they saw often. He didn't approach anyone yet. He simply guided his horse slowly, letting the people see that he wasn't a threat, just a visitor looking for someone. Ayanna appeared near one of the houses, carrying a small basket of herbs. She looked surprised when she saw him, but not upset. In fact, there was a hint of relief in her eyes, like seeing him made her feel a little less alone. "You came," she said softly, walking toward him. "I said I'd help," Mason replied with a warm smile. "Didn't plan on breaking my promise." Ayanna looked around, making sure her younger siblings weren't too close to overhear. They were playing near a small tree, their cheerful voices filling the village with life. Mason could see how much they adored her by the way they kept glancing her way, waiting for her attention. She waved at them, and they waved back happily. "My mother is inside," Ayanna said. "Would you like to meet her?" Mason nodded. "Only if she's comfortable with it." "She will be," Ayanna said gently. "She's cautious but kind." She led him inside their small but warm home. The room smelled like fresh herbs and wood smoke. There were handmade blankets folded neatly, and the walls were decorated with small woven patterns that held meaning he didn't fully understand, but admired anyway. Her mother stood near a wooden counter, preparing tea. She turned when she heard them, her calm eyes studying the stranger for a moment. She wasn't fearful, just aware. "Mother," Ayanna said softly, "this is Mason. He helped me yesterday." He listened. Her mother nodded slowly, her expression softening. "Thank you for looking after my daughter." Mason shook his head politely. She just needed someone to talk to. Anyone would have done the same. Ayanna's mother smiled a little. Not everyone stops for someone else these days. They all sat together at a low wooden table while she poured warm tea into simple clay cups. Mason kept his posture relaxed, respectful. He didn't want to appear as someone who came to interfere, only someone who came to support. Ayanna explained the situation again, this time with more details. Her mother added things here and there, speaking calmly even though her eyes revealed the stress she tried to hide from her children. Mason listened carefully, absorbing every bit of information. He didn't interrupt. He just nodded when needed. "There are people who say we need to leave," her mother said softly. "They say the land is not ours. But this land belonged to my parents, and their parents, and the ones before them. We have worked hard to care for it." "Have you spoken to anyone in town?" Mason asked, gently. "Anyone who handles land issues?" "We tried," Ayanna said. "But they said they needed documents we don't have. My father kept everything. But after he passed, things got confusing. Some papers were misplaced." Mason thought for a moment. "Sometimes people say they have papers even when things aren't fully clear. Maybe we can talk to the local office again. But this time, with someone who knows how to ask the right questions." Ayanna looked hopeful but unsure. "Do you think it will help?" "It could," Mason replied. "It's worth trying. And if we don't find answers there, we'll look somewhere else." Her mother smiled gently. "You are very kind, Mason." He shook his head slightly. "I just want to give you a fair chance. That's all." Ayanna's younger siblings ran into the room, then two curious children with eyes full of wonder. They stared at Mason as if he were a character from a storybook. "Who is he?" the younger boy asked. "A friend," Ayanna said simply. That one word warmed Mason more than he expected. The children smiled shyly before running back outside. Ayanna followed briefly to tell them to stay close, then returned to Mason, who was now standing near the doorway. "I want to show you something," she said quietly. He followed her outside and around the corner of their home. They walked along a small path that led to a wide piece of land surrounded by tall grass and old trees. The earth here looked rich and cared for. Flowers grew naturally along the edges, and the river nearby gave the land a gentle, soothing sound. "This is what we're trying to protect," Ayanna said, her voice soft but full of deep meaning. "My father planted those trees. He taught us how to take care of them. My mother grows medicines from the plants over there. And that open space. She pointed to a flat area near the river. That's where we gathered during special times. Mason stood still, taking it all in. He could feel the history here, not because anyone told him, but because the land itself seemed to hold memories like old photographs gently laid in the soil. He understood now why losing this place would break Ayana's heart. "It's beautiful," he said honestly. "It's home," she whispered. They walked slowly, talking quietly. Ayana told him small stories about her childhood, how she used to race her siblings across the field, how her father once built a swing between two trees, how her mother taught her the names of every plant growing here. Her voice wasn't sad now. It was nostalgic, warm. Mason listened closely, feeling honored that she trusted him enough to share these memories. Before they headed back, Mason looked at her with a calm determination. "We're not giving up on this," he said. "Not today. Not tomorrow." Ayana looked at him, surprised by the certainty in his voice. "Why do you care so much?" she asked gently. "Because you do," Mason answered simply. "And because some things are worth fighting for, not with anger, but with patience and persistence." The next 2 days were filled with effort. Mason took Ayana and her mother to the local administrative office. They spoke to several people, some helpful, some dismissive, but Mason stayed polite, respectful, and firm. His steady presence gave Ayana the courage to speak more confidently. Together, they searched for old records, made copies of whatever they could find, and gathered names of people who might help them in the future. Outside the office, the world still felt busy and complicated. But inside the small group they had formed, Ayana, her mother, and Mason, there was a sense of teamwork. One afternoon, while walking back to the village, Ayana said softly, "I didn't know we could actually make progress." Little steps," Mason replied with a gentle smile. "That's how everything starts." She looked ahead at the road, her expression calmer than before. "Thank you," she said, "for everything you're doing." "You don't have to thank me," Mason said. "I just want to help you stand on solid ground." When they reached the village, her siblings ran up to them, laughing and pulling Ayana toward the riverbank. They wanted to show her something they had found: smooth stones shaped like hearts. Ayana laughed with them, her tiredness replaced with a lighter joy that Mason hadn't seen before. Her mother smiled too, watching her children with soft eyes. "You've brought peace into our home these past few days," she told Mason. "I am grateful." Mason felt a gentle warmth inside. He wasn't used to being thanked so sincerely. He simply nodded, humbled. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees and the sky turned golden once again, Ayana and Mason stood near the river, watching the water ripple softly. "I'm glad you came that day," she said quietly. "I was losing hope." "You weren't losing hope," Mason replied. "You were carrying too much alone." Ayana looked at him, her eyes reflecting the sunset. "I don't feel alone anymore." Mason felt something shift inside him, a quiet, meaningful connection that didn't need fancy words. "You'll never have to be," he said softly. The wind moved around them, gentle and warm, as if agreeing. Their journey was far from over. But something had changed. Ayana's heart felt lighter. Mason had found a purpose deeper than his travels. And the land they stood on felt safer, as if it knew someone was finally standing up for it. Together, they had taken the first real steps toward protecting everything that mattered. And this was only the beginning. The next morning began with a soft golden light spreading across the open land. The sky held a calm glow, and the cool wind carried the scent of fresh grass. John stepped outside the cabin and paused for a moment, breathing deeply. It felt like the beginning of something new, something he had never experienced before. Inside the cabin, Ayana was still asleep, her face peaceful after the emotional storm she had passed through the night before. He didn't want to disturb her, so he quietly fed the horses and prepared breakfast. When Ayana finally stepped outside, she looked calmer than he had ever seen her. Her long, dark hair moved gently with the breeze, and although there were still traces of sadness in her eyes, there was also something new. Something like hope. She greeted him with a soft smile. A smile that wasn't forced. A smile that felt real. John felt a warmth in his chest. It wasn't love yet. At least not in the way stories describe it. It was something deeper. Something that came when two souls understood each other. They sat on the porch, eating simple food and watching the sun climb higher. Ayanna spoke first. She thanked him again for everything he had done, but before she could say more, John shook his head gently and told her she didn't need to thank him for being human. She looked away, touched by his words. She admitted that she hadn't felt safe with anyone for a long time. Not even in her own village. John did not press her for details. He knew that healing comes slowly, step by step. Later in the day, Ayanna walked around the ranch, observing everything with quiet curiosity. She touched the fence, the trees, and the earth, as if she was trying to feel what peace meant. John followed her from a distance, giving her space yet still making sure she wasn't alone. When she paused near the horses, he joined her and told her about each one, how he raised them, what their personalities were like, how the ranch had become his life. She listened with focus, and for the first time since they met, she laughed softly when one of the horses nudged her hand. It was a gentle moment, but it brought color back to her quiet world. As the day passed, Ayanna opened up more. She spoke about her childhood, her love for her people, and the traditions she grew up with. She told him about the songs her grandmother used to sing and how she missed hearing them. Her voice trembled sometimes, but she never stopped speaking. John realized these were things she needed to say, words she had held in for too long. He listened carefully, not interrupting even once. He knew that trust was something delicate, and she was offering him something precious. In the afternoon, clouds formed in the sky, and a light rain began to fall. Instead of returning to the cabin, Ayanna stood beneath the falling drops and lifted her face. She closed her eyes and let the water touch her skin, as if the rain was washing away the weight she had carried for years. John watched quietly, respecting the moment. Something about her standing there, calm, soft, strong, felt like a silent message. She was finding her own strength again. When she finally walked back toward him, he handed her a blanket, and she wrapped it around her shoulders. They sat near the fire he had prepared, listening to the soft sound of rain. Ayanna told him that she had made a decision. She said she felt safe on the ranch, but she knew she couldn't stay hidden forever. Her people needed to know she was all right. John nodded. Even though part of him wished she would stay a little longer, he didn't let his feelings show. Instead, he told her that whatever decision she made, he would support her. Before sunset, the rain stopped, and the sky cleared again. The world looked fresh, washed clean, shining under the soft light. They prepared their horses and began the ride toward her village. The journey was quiet at first, but peaceful. Ayanna looked stronger with every passing mile, as if returning to her people was giving her courage. John rode beside her, making sure she didn't feel alone. He knew this moment mattered to her more than anything else. When they reached the edge of her village, Ayanna slowed her horse. She looked nervous. John placed a calming hand on her arm and told her she didn't need to be afraid. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a second, and then moved forward. Some of her people came out, surprised to see her, and their faces softened with relief. They welcomed her warmly, happy that she had returned safely. One of the elders approached John and thanked him. Ayanna watched this with a grateful expression. She realized that John had given her more than safety. He had given her understanding, comfort, and space to find herself again. When the time came for him to leave, she walked with him to the edge of the village. There, under the warm evening sky, she spoke clearly and honestly. She told him that she had arrived at his ranch in tears, afraid and lost, and he never once asked her to pretend. She said he saw her pain but also her strength, and that she would never forget the kindness he had shown her. John didn't say much at first. He simply looked at her with that steady calm he always had. Then he told her that she didn't owe him anything, that he helped her because it was the right thing to do. He said her tears were not a sign of weakness, they were a sign that she was human, and no one should ever feel ashamed of their feelings. Ayana stepped closer and placed her hand on his. She thanked him softly, in a voice filled with sincerity. She knew she had to stay with her people now, but she also knew that her journey with John had changed her. It had taught her that healing was possible, that kindness still existed, and that strangers could become something more. Someone to trust. Someone who understands, without asking for anything in return. John finally rode away, glancing back only once. Ayana remained standing where he left her, watching him until he disappeared into the horizon. She did not cry this time. Instead, her heart felt light, peaceful, and full of new strength. Back at his ranch, John continued his simple life, but he often thought of the girl who arrived in tears and left with a gentle smile. He never sought anything in return. Yet he felt something inside him had grown, something warm and meaningful. The open land felt the same, yet somehow different, touched by the memory of what they had shared. Ayana, too, carried the experience with her. She spoke to her people with a new confidence, and each day, she remembered that there was someone out there who told her she didn't have to pretend. Someone who reminded her that sincerity is stronger than silence, and compassion is stronger than fear. Their paths did not cross again soon, but neither of them forgot. And sometimes, the most beautiful stories are not about staying together. They are about meeting at the right moment, healing in each other's presence, and walking forward with new courage. That was the truth of their story. A girl who cried without hiding, and a cowboy who told her she didn't need to pretend, and because of that simple honesty, both of them found a new beginning.